Hey folks, welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about how to use the power of the villain within. The villain within us. We may not like to think that we have a villain within us, but in a sense we do. I think it'll make sense when I start to describe it. I'm thinking you'll probably recognize the villain within, and my hope is that we can shift it so that you can see it differently and start to gain some more control, some more power, some more agency over how you move through your life and getting things that you ultimately want. So, this is what this whole series is about. Born for the journey. I believe that you are born for this journey to become your true self. And on that note, I'm going to flip over to the iPad here where I'm talking about the true self, which is at the top here of this chart, where everything is about getting to this point, to this true self. You know, that's a term we don't use much in our culture, but it is that part of us that is always okay. It's that part of us that we want to become. It's that part of us that is can be hidden. We may catch glimpses of it, but we totally can get there. And just the journey of getting closer and closer to that higher self, that true self, that alone is worth a lot. So we're going to be looking at this model of what I call the 4-part cycle. It's a way of looking at yourself. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of looking of moving through change in 4 different parts. It's just a map. It's just a way to simplify something that can feel very complex. And so I break it down into P-A-R-T. And the villain lives in here somewhere. Maybe you already know, but the villain lives in here. And what I like to say is whenever you start out with a plan, you've got an idea that you want to launch into the world, inevitably there is this part of us that starts to hold us back. It's that part of us that questions what we're doing when things get hard, or whenever we think about, maybe nobody's going to like this and therefore nobody's going to like me, or when we start to take action, a lot of these 2 things, we can get stuck in a mind-body loop. This is where the mind lives on the chart. This is where the body lives on the chart. This is where the heart lives on the chart. Quadrant 3, and then 4, the spirit lives here. Mind, body, heart, and spirit. Now I got a lot of words here. We've got the plan, the 4-part. We've got the plan, P-L-A-N. We've got action that we take whenever we actually start to do things in the world. Then we've got results. And our interpretation of those results can bring up emotions, partly why the heart works over there in that 3rd quadrant. Emotions, they can be positive, negative, but we've got to recognize that we are emotional beings. It's super helpful once we can start to identify, oh, wait a minute, I'm having a thought. I'm having an emotion that's going with that thought. It's all about awareness, and that's that final part, moving into this higher truth, this higher self, where we can start to really look at everything. The spirit self is the only part that can look at all of these, and it's really important down here. It's starting to look like a mess, as it typically does, but it's really important down here that the spirit can see this body place, because within our bodies, we've got this idea of the villain. All right, I am going to make some of these layers go away so it's a little bit more clear, and hopefully I can erase some of this stuff, so bear with me. And as I'm doing this, I want to talk about the hero's journey. Now that maps onto this 4-part self and this 4-part cycle as well. In fact, the thing that got me most interested in this cycle was the fact that it reminded me of the hero's journey. I got interested highly in this idea about 6 or 7 years ago, and I realized, wow, the hero's journey is right in this cycle. So what do I mean by that, and how does the villain play in to all this? Well, so another way of looking at the part, where can I put it? I'm going to put it over here. We've got the 4 parts. Another way of looking at it is protagonist. Who's the protagonist? Back to English class, folks. That's the hero, right? This is called the hero's journey. The protagonist, pro meaning positive, meaning moving forward, right? And then we have who? The antagonist. The antagonist is our villain. I always spell villain wrong, so look, that time it looks right. Very nice. Always spell villain wrong. That is a limiting belief that I just disproved. Very important. Very appropriate that that's happening down here in quadrant 2. The limiting belief, the antagonist, the villain, that part of us that thinks, I can't do this. That is so important to grasp that we have that within us. Not so we can try to beat it to death. We can't. That just doesn't work. It's always going to be there. It's ultimately there to help us. It's that protective part of us that's always been within us that has said, man, watch out. There is a lion right around the corner probably, because we know there are lions around here, right? We know they are because Charlie just got eaten last week and I don't want to get eaten. Charlie's a caveman name. Very popular back in caveman days. So that villain is real. The resistance is real. Whenever the protagonist, the first thing that the protagonist thinks when he learns he's supposed to go on this journey is laid out before him, he goes, oh no, I'm the wrong guy. You're looking at the wrong gal. You know, we male, female, it makes no difference here. I'm going to use the male mostly, but just to try to not confuse things. But this protagonist is going to say, no, they're going to refuse the call. Very typical, classic hero's journey pattern. That happens in here. Like, it's like, well, I don't know. I'm not going to really take action. Remember, action is here. But interesting things happen when the hero does take action and begins to face the villain. Then the results that happen here, it gets kind of funky here, because remember, we're at P and A, and the R is actually the artist. I'm taking artistic license, artist. The artist within. Remember, we're here in the heart. Can you see this? I do this every freaking time. Sorry, folks. This is what I've been drawing. Okay, good gracious. Talked about the protagonist, hero, the antagonist, and the villain taking action. And when he finally takes action, gosh, I will eventually stop doing this where I don't show you the picture. Let's see. So let's live and learn. Face the demons, folks. The artist, the R in the part, I'm taking artistic license with this. This is where the hero over time, because see, he's doing this, right? He starts out, meets one villain, then he meets the other villains and the villain's friends, and then he meets the, just all the different road of trials, all the things, right? Well, that's really kind of happening in here because the artist, he's learning, he's growing, he's putting in that 1,000 hours, right? He's growing and growing and growing, and maybe he's kind of hanging out and really facing the villain over here in 2 and 3, and sometimes he even goes back to 1 and gets stuck in his head and he bounces in between the 2. But when all this really works well together is when you go and you have a plan and you follow at least the part of the plan, and you start to move and you learn something, you get a result, and you have a new realization every time you learn something new, right? Well, this villain is really important and can be transformative when you realize it's really the villain within, because so many people, and we all do it, But so many people get fixated on the villain that is not within, but the villain that is outside. I'm going to try to remember to come back to this. So, the outside villain. The outside villain is also known as the other. There's something called othering. And that's whenever you say, I could have done this. The only reason I can't do it is because someone is stopping me. Sounds like a villain, right? Well, you're turning what's really an internal problem and you're facing it outward. A lot of times people do this. We do this when we're not willing to face what's inside of us. Why can't we face it? Well, because we don't have a strong ground to stand on. Where do we find the strong ground? Well, if we will come up in here and move into the spirit self. What do I mean by that? Well, if we can start to trust in something bigger than ourselves and realize that this fight, this journey, this whole thing we're doing really isn't about us. It's really about some bigger picture. It's about some bigger belief in that higher self, that higher power. You know, you can call it God, you can call it true meaning, you can call it altruism. Yes, that's a word, altruism. You know, just wanting to help your fellow man. A cause that is much bigger than you is something to live for, okay? So when we can start moving into that part of us, because it's all in there within us, because as Jill Bolte Taylor would say, all of these pieces represent parts of us. All of these are actual cells that live within our brain and in our nervous system. There's the, and I cannot recall the names. That's something I've got to work on. I haven't talked much about Jill Bolte Taylor lately, but she believes in that forefront of the mind. This is by the way, this is the right brain over here. That's an RT. This is the left brain. I know it's backwards. This is the logical brain part of us. By the way, there's a lower part, and then there's a higher part of our evolution of how we, you know, that lizard brain. Maybe you've heard that term before. Well, that lives down here. That's part of the villain, man. That's part of the antagonist, right? That's part of that quick response that happens when fear, like, oh my gosh, there's a lion around the corner. Okay, so I know this is a lot. My drawings always look like a mess, but if you'll just remember this core idea. The core idea is that if you want to be the hero of your own life, I'll use the hero's journey metaphor, you got to face the villains in the world. There are lots of them. There are going to be lots of problems. But when you do that with courage, courage comes from the heart. I just erased it. Courage comes from the heart. The word core, corazón in Spanish, heart, the core, the middle, the essence, the core, courage. When you step forward with courage in each part, focusing on what and who and what you love, and you focus on the spirit self within you, then it's immensely powerful, because you can move into a whole new side of your brain that we typically don't use, that right side of our brain, and we can start to develop a whole new way of freeing ourselves from the limitations of thinking that someone else is keeping us from moving forward, right? You're giving your power away to that force outside of you. You're saying, oh, I could do it if only that didn't exist. Well, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. I mean, there are forces that we must overcome, but the greatest force is our lack of belief in ourselves, our lack of belief in of hope that things are going to be able to get better. So That's just my first iteration of talking about this really critical piece, this piece of using the villain within, the resistance within, that part of us, seeing that it's there and making sure that you're not blaming something or someone else for the reason why you can't move forward. Because when we do that, we've given up our power. We've given it to them. They're the reason, right? They have the power. You've given it to them. And you'll be able to move so much more freely with so much more kindness and understanding when you just realize that most people they're just trying to do the best they can. That's what we're all doing. That's a whole nother topic. I won't get into that. These things are bleeding together for me, but I'm going to end that there. I am David Bourne. This is Bourne for the Journey. Good luck out there.